Welcome, welcome everybody. I'm going to give Zoom a minute to do what it does and let everybody in. Welcome. This is the webinar on weight loss is not a health goal. We're going to be talking about the impact of focusing too much on weight or the number on the scale specifically as a health goal and talk about alternatives. We're going to talk about some of the challenges that arise not only from a body image issue and what it does to us psychologically and emotionally, but also what it does for us in terms of our real health outcomes. And so joining me today is going to be Abra Pappa and Amanda Mittman. My name is Lara Zakaria, AKA the Foodie Pharmacist. I'm an integrative pharmacist and a nutritionist. I specialize in lifestyle medicine and functional medicine. And what I typically do day to day is talk to people about how to use food and lifestyle in order to improve their risk of chronic disease, in order to improve their overall health outcomes. And so this conversation very often comes up in my clinic and in the patients I'm speaking with, because very often they have been told in the past that the body that they're in is somehow contributing to their risk. So that's part of what started this conversation. I'm going to pass the baton over to Abra, and I'm going to let her give us her background. Go ahead, Abra.
You so much. And hello, everyone. My name is Abra Pappa. I am a nutritionist. I have a master's degree in nutrition. I'm a CNS, and I am very much committed to using food in a therapeutic way to support individuals to lead healthier, happier lives. I do specialize in disordered eating and the sort of complicated intersection of disordered eating and chronic health conditions, specifically gut health conditions. And I also am a big ol' fan of cooking and culinary nutrition. So in addition to my private practice, I also run the food and wellness blog, Abra's Kitchen. And I have found in my own practice that helping individuals get in the kitchen and cook amazing, delicious, supportive food is a path towards a deeper wellness, deeper happiness around food. And I'm thrilled to chat about this topic because it gets hot and spicy.
Yeah,
it sure does. Great. Amanda.
Hi, everybody. I am a dietitian, and I do not cook, actually. My husband's a chef, so I don't have to cook anymore. So I'm, I just throwing that out there for those people who are in the wellness industry who also don't like to cook. That's me. But I'm a registered dietitian, and I specialize in eating disorders, disordered eating, body image, health at every size. And I own a group practice of registered dietitians in the Western Mass area. That's where I live. And so I wear that hat and I see clients and run my business. And then I also run Bitchin' Body Image RD. So I help other clinicians incorporate foundational body image counseling skills into their practice. Because no matter what type of work you do, it's really important to be having these conversations because people really need to be talking about it. So I like to try and help people feel more comfortable in doing that. So this is like talking about this stuff is my jam. I love it. FYI, I curse. I'm a New Yorker. Like, I'm sorry if my language, I just want to apologize in advance. I'm kind of, that's kind of my brand. So I apologize if I offend anyone. I will try and watch my language here. So.
I appreciate you both. And we're all New Yorkers and East Coasters. So yeah. So we'll be talking fast. There might be a couple words that slip through. But it just shows, I think, how passionate we are about this conversation and how important it is. A couple of housekeeping items. Number one, I posted a little bit in the chat. Please feel free to use the chat. In fact, let's all practice and get our little typey fingers warmed up, but just go ahead and type where you're from. Let me know if you're a healthcare professional. Let me know what you're, tell me a fun fact about yourself, but yeah, get those fingers warmed up. I love reading it. I know I'm speaking on Abra and Amanda's behalf as well. We love seeing the engagement and the interaction and knowing what's hitting and what's resonating for you guys as well. We will try to save some time at the end for some questions, but feel free to type the questions. I will do my best to catch them all. If I don't catch it, retype it, that's fine. And we will probably pause periodically to highlight some comments and some thoughts that are happening in the conversation. I already see some professionals I recognize and friends of mine. Hi, all. So please, I'd love to hear your thoughts as we're sort of having this conversation as well. And then if you personally have had experience in this space and this is really resonating, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So that all said, I'm going to start with Amanda. Amanda, I am curious, what is it about this conversation that drove you to this? We met while you were doing your master's at University of Bridgeport, and you already were in the space. You're a registered dietitian. You'd been there for years, and you're already thinking about this conversation that many years back.
Yeah.
So can you kind of fill in for us what really resonated for you about this conversation?
Yeah. So I started doing my master's a couple of years ago, and Lara was my professor. Very difficult classes that I got through and loved. But in this space, what I knew going into it that this was going to be a little rough. But there was like literally no conversation about weight acceptance and that people come in all size bodies, and that is okay. The predominant message was you need to be as small as possible. You need to watch your calories. You need to eat these certain foods, and that is the only way that you're going to be healthy. And for me, you know, I am in a plus size body. I have a small fat body. And so already that was like, okay, well, I don't fit into that. I also have my own history of orthorexia and, you know, eating disorder and disordered eating for many, many years. And so it was very, very vulnerable to be in that space, in the functional space. So I kind of knew what I was getting into, but it was really, really hard because I'd go into class. I'm like, okay, well, people telling me like, there's no way that I can be healthy, but I'm like, but I feel healthier now in this body, in a larger body than I ever did before. This is my healed, you know, recovered body. And so Lara, you were the first teacher, the professor that I ever had in general in nutrition, period, that was like, yeah, actually this like health thing and this weight thing isn't exactly what we think. And I was like, this is a holy shit moment, right? I'm like, wow, that feels really, it was such, you gave me such permission. I felt really, really seen. And then I, you know, saw you doing something around like, hey people, like weight doesn't equal health. Even though we've been told that many times over. And that just felt really important to be like, I see you, thank you for doing this work, because especially in the functional world, which I do believe in, because, you know, it's just unheard of. And I'm wondering, Abra, like what, because I see you nodding and you're in this world too, but you also work with disordered eating and things like that, like what you've seen too.
We have similar stories, Amanda, and I'm a bit of an outlier in the functional space because I do work with eating disorders, but I came to this journey with my own stuff, a long history of really disordered patterns around food and very distorted body image issues. And when I first entered into the world of wellness, it was all about like, how can we get thinner? And that's clearly the path. Like, we must get thinner. We must get thinner. That's the path to health. And then I, you know, had my own aha moment that is absolutely not the path to health. As a matter of fact, I might say this 50 times today, most weight loss diets are not health promoting in any way. And what I was starting to see was individuals that were going on this sort of diet journey to lose weight were getting sicker and sicker, and their labs were looking worse because they were losing weight in a way that was not actually supportive of their health. So there was a big awakening for me. And yes, in the functional space, honestly, in the wellness space in general, there just is not enough discussion around how to have a supportive, wonderful, beautiful relationship with food and body and be a healthy person. And that means being in all sizes, right? It is not one particular size that denotes health. For sure. I know that for sure. So yeah, so my journey was similar. And you know, what's interesting is that now I do quite a lot of lectures for other practitioners in the space, for other universities, around the very important nuance of languaging around body size, languaging around food, languaging around diet, for hopefully so more practitioners can start to open their eyes a little bit to understand the damage that they could be doing by just having a simple conversation around what their patient should be eating, but doing so in a way that languaging is very triggering and then leads that individual down a path of disordered behaviors. So very similar sort of entry into this space.
Yeah, what a great point. I love that you talk to others about the language, and the language that for any providers that are listening, it's like, we really need to watch our language, because there is a power differential when clients come to us. Like, I think of when I go to the doctor, it's like they put on even if my nurse practitioner is not wearing a white coat, there is this, power differential in wanting to please. And so anytime we say something like, your body isn't right, or, you need to be doing this and this, cutting out this, without really doing it in a trauma-informed way and really reading their history, it does a lot of damage. And so the words do matter.
100%, 100%. And what you're saying, I think, really resonates, both for me as a patient, for me as a woman, for me in similar to you, Amanda. I'm a straight size, but I'm not a thin woman, right? And we were talking about this the other day, and I was saying, like, it occurred to me one day, I woke up and I realized there was not a day in the entirety of my life, from the time, I don't know, I guess I was an adolescent, that I didn't wake up in the morning, or at least at some point in the day, think about, what's the activity I'm going to do today to lose weight. It is so pervasive in the way I think we have been socialized, that it's hard to imagine that you're not thinking about your weight or your size in some way. And that, to me, especially if you are trying to promote health, right, is what kind of got me snowballed into the conversation. What actually is health? Is health really having this persistent, obsessive thinking about that? Or all the other things that I'm doing to not only promote my health, to think about my well-being, but also just to enjoy life? It stops you from really being fully present in the moment. It's interesting. I just posted about the blue zones, and one of the concepts in the blue zones is about connectivity. It's about enjoying life. It's about having a sense of purpose. And how can you hold a sense of purpose when you think your purpose is revolved around your body size, or your weight, or the number on the scale?
Yeah. And I think we talked about this during the live, but that was very much my story as well. And if you looked at me, when I was kind of going through my disordered eating, I was in a smaller body, and I was, doing all these things, and I was eating all the right foods, and someone might look at me and be like, oh, she's healthy. But my mental health and my life was very, very small, because all I would do is think about, how do I lose more weight? How do I not gain more weight? The fear of that. And I also went back to school to be a dietitian. So that really added on a whole nice layer. And was I healthy? And so, like, the question then is, like, what is health? What is health, and who am I?
That's a great segue. That's a great segue to the first item on our agenda. And by the way, if you guys have any specific questions or anything you want to make sure we cover, or you just want to just shout out, like, hey, please use the chat for that. One of I think the conflicting pieces of information, what we've been sort of fed as being a barometer of our health, is not only the weight on the scale, but the BMI. And I think we have to address the elephant in the room, that in and of itself, not only is that false, but not only do we in our clinical practices don't see connections between body weight, BMI, and health, but there's actually been disproven. And we need to start talking more about how we dismantle this narrative. Amanda, I'm gonna pitch this to you, because I know you've got some great data on this. We're gonna share your screen. I'll give you a second to do that.
Okay.
I agree, Michelle. This is a really important conversation. And hi, nice to see you.
All right. Can everybody see this thing? I could present it, but then I lose things. I'm very bad multitasker. Is this okay if I share it like this?
You're great. You're great.
Thank you. Before I get going, I really want to acknowledge my privilege as I speak about this topic. I'm coming to you as a white, cisgender, heterosexual woman. I'm in a small fat body, and I do have thin privilege. And so therefore, I always like to acknowledge where I'm coming at this. And I really want to honor, everybody's lived experience. And if any of this feels like challenging or difficult, like just take care of you. But it's important to know that, like, where I'm kind of coming at this, and my experience is very different than others. So I want to just, we hear about the BMI and why the BMI I'm sure you've heard the BMI is bullshit. And I'm actually gonna, when I'm done with this, link to an incredible podcast episode with the author. This book should be on everybody's reading list. It's called Fearing the Black Body, and it's written by Sabrina Strings, who is a sociologist. And it talks all about the BMI and the very, very racist origins of the BMI. And there's a great podcast episode that she discusses her work, and it kind of, it's like a 30-minute podcast, but it's like, I think it should be required listening for everybody. So I will link to that in the chat when I'm done. But so BMI, right? Body mass index. This was developed in the 1800s by, you know, some white dude, of course. And the whole purpose was to find who's the ideal man, right? Across a population of white European men, right? And if, all right, already we're flawed, right? And please note that this was never intended to be used as a means of medical assessment. This was used to study populations. And then along the line, pretty much insurance companies decided, oh, well, we need a way to kind of like measure if someone's healthy or not. Let's use the BMI. But this BMI is as we can see, already faulty. So this kind of was created in the 1800s, but not intended to be used the way that it's used. Now, the problem is that the current BMI cutoffs, right? You know, you have like, if your BMI is like 18.5, I don't even know what they are, quite honestly, but like, you know, you have all your different classes of weight. You have normal weight and overweight, which I hate because it's like over what weight. And I also just want to say, I do not use the words overweight or quote obesity, because those are words that were created to pathologize people in larger bodies. So if I do say obese, it's with, please know it's with air quotes, because I don't use those words. So the current BMI cutoffs are based on the imagined ideal Caucasian and do not consider a person's gender or ethnicity. So already, nope. We know that people in larger bodies tend to get less quality care. So if you're somebody who has a higher BMI, do you want to go to the doctor and talk to the doctor about maybe like anything that's happening? No. We know that too much focus on weight can encourage harmful eating habits. The BMI and weight bias encourage larger people from seeking care, which leads to worse health outcomes. So what I want to say is we think that someone in a higher body, and maybe they're dealing with chronic health conditions, it must be because of their weight. But like, I want to argue that the stress of living in a larger body, or even like a past of yo-yo dieting, or, you know, the stigma that they face is really what causes the worse health outcomes. Because we know that weight stigma causes chronic stress, and there are better predictors of health status. And that goes into the social determinants of health, which is a whole other conversation. If Abra, I don't know if you want to like talk about it, but I just want to throw that out there. So what you've probably learned, and this is what I learned, is that BMI is related to certain conditions, right? Osteoarthritis, sleep apnea, hypertension, coronary heart disease. But it's not in the way that we think, right? We have no data that shows, and you said this too, Lara, like correlation is not, right, causation. And so, yes, there might be some related parts of it, but being in a higher weight body does not cause these things. And you know why? Because people in smaller bodies also have osteoarthritis, sleep apnea, like all of these things, right? And so we have to also zoom out. And if you're a provider, really looking at the big picture of what's the stress, what is their, their background, genetics, socioeconomic status, do they have access to healthcare, right? So these are all really, really important things to consider. But what we've just been taught and what the media teaches us is the weight, because it's easy to think that, right? So
easy to think about and sell to.
I sell too. Oh, yeah. And sell. And so does a lower BMI always equal better health outcomes? And so like, I think you know what the answer is. It's no, it doesn't. And I also want to argue that being in a lower weight body, right, is actually worse. I mean, like people in midlife going through perimenopause and menopause, people in smaller bodies actually don't fare as well as people who are, maybe have a higher BMI. So you can see here, this is the kind of the BMI scale on the bottom. And what you can see here is that weight and health aren't related in the way that we believe. It's not this like, you know, in one direction. It's kind of a bell-shaped curve where the most protective over here, these are like quote unquote overweight BMIs. Aha, right? So yes, of course, on either end of the spectrum, there, you know, a bell-shaped curve, there might be a higher risk for certain things, risk, not cause for certain things, but just know that the most protective is in this kind of like overweight and quote obese, how you call it, categories.
Can I add something to that? Because
Yeah.
you reminded me of a conversation I had last week about menopause and the menopause belly.
Yeah.
So when we go through menopause, if you're menstruating, when you eventually stop, you're no longer producing estrogen, right? So you get this plummet in estrogen. As it turns out, that menopause belly that occurs actually is the new location for the production of not as much estrogen, not the same kind of estrogen, but some estrogen. And it's actually thought to be protective. And in fact, the women that have that belly, now it's important to understand there's a difference between the subcutaneous fat that creates that belly versus the visceral fat that surrounds organs. Those two are two different kinds of fat. And I want to put a pin in that and come back to that conversation about skinny fat. And, you know, again, this sort of like getting more into the nuance of what the fat deposition or the adipose tissue does. But essentially, women who have a little bit more of that belly fat have a little bit more estrogen production, and it's proven to be beneficial long term because they're not at zero in terms of estrogen production, endogenous estrogen production. So that means that lower risk of osteoporosis, lower risk of heart disease. It's protective to a certain extent on certain cancers. So just something to kind of add another context and another layer to what you just presented, Amanda.
Yeah, it's like a little life preserver. I've got mine on. I'm gonna do just fine. I've got my little like. I love talking about that part. Yeah, because it's protective, right? And we need that. I wanted to show this because this is kind of recent in the news, is that, you know, the American Medical Association says that BMI alone is not enough to assess health and weight. Now, as a caveat here, they were like, we should measure skin folds and other kind of harmful things. But I think the fact that they were able to say BMI alone is not enough to assess health and weight is, and it made the New York Times, is pretty dang important. And they said, you know, I also like the policy officially recognizes the historical harm of BMI and states that the metric has been used for racist exclusion. And someone said, you know, it's just a very poor measure of general health. Someone with an elevated BMI may be perfectly healthy. And then my question is, well, what does health kind of mean? So I'm kind of finishing up here is that, like, you know, we know this, hold on, I know weight is related to health problems. And like, so like, is it? I mean, being in a larger body can sometimes be linked to, you know, quote, unhealthy lifestyle habits. But we also need to think it's the same for people in lower weight bodies, but we need to also think about why, right? We have socioeconomic status, low education, discrimination, and access to healthcare. These all come into play when it comes into health and also weight. So what we think is like, oh, I'm overweight and I'm going to die. I mean, this is kind of the general thing when we burn it all down and we're like, okay, what is your fear of the weight? It's like, well, my mom died in her 60s, or, you know, I want to be around for a long time. And so what we've kind of made in our minds is direct route of like, okay, well, if I have, you know, if I'm fat or if I'm gaining weight, then I'm going to get sick. So the truth of the matter is it's way more complicated, and that these are all sorts of things that play into what our weight is. It's not just about the food that you eat. It's about all of these things, which, you know, our weight, can it? Maybe, I don't know, but it's not the cause. So, you know, things are a little bit more complicated, but they seem on the surface. So yeah, so there are many reasons why someone has weight on their body: genetics, social determinants of health, hormones, like Lara just talked about, and life stage, metabolic syndrome, medications, microbiome. There are many body compositions at each weight, right? So when we learned about the BMI, we learned Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is like really muscular, he's considered like obese because his BMI is really high because he has a lot of muscle. There are very few health conditions in which the specific body composition or their measurement of gravity biologically alters the course of the disease. and how do we know this is true, is that we can modify behaviors, not lose weight. And I think this is what Abra was talking about, and see health improvements. Like I had a client who actually gained weight, engaged in different sorts of movement and eating, and improved mental health, and her cholesterol went down significantly. And she was like, how? I'm like, it's a thing. And lastly, I just want to say, like, weight is not a behavior, right? Then it's not subject to behavioral modification. People can do all the right things, but not lose weight.
Mhm.
They can. And so when we can work with patients and clients on developing healthier attitudes that cultivate well-being for the long term, whether or not they lose weight or not, that's really what we want to be doing. And that just throw this little factoid in, is that most diets for weight loss purposes fail, and that no study has shown that weight loss diet is effective past the 2-year mark. So we've really been sold like a whole load of BS.
Yes.
So that's kind of my stuff that I want to share.
Thanks, Amanda. I think that was
Yeah.
really interesting. And you guys, please feel free to put your questions, comments into the chat box. I'm curious to know what you think. So fun fact, I have been in the overweight BMI category since I was in high school / college and a competitive dancer. So I've never been under that limit, and even at the height of my physical fitness, and the smallest I've ever been physically in my whole life. So, Abra, I want to kind of ping it back to you, and I would love for you to take on that, so that Amanda set us up for all the sort of like broader information. Can you kind of bring it back to how you see this in your practice, and what does this do in terms of our ability to really be able to advocate for the best health outcomes when we stop and only look at body size? How do you see that impact people psychologically, physically, like in terms of their health? Like, talk to us.
I'm going to start by saying this. The sentence that I say 400 times a week in practice, nonstop, in lectures, in teachings, in all the things. I am far more interested in health promoting behaviors than I ever am in the number on the scale, in the BMI, in any of that. Far more interested. And we have massive amounts of data to support that. And what I want to see in my practice for my clients is a shift in the way they're thinking about how they treat themselves. And I think when we're focusing so much on a number, on BMI, on a scale number, you and Amanda spoke about this in your live the other day, about how there's so much blame. We put so much blame on ourselves that we're doing something wrong and that we just can't lose the weight. And I will tell you, after being in this wellness world for almost 20 years, working with literally thousands at this point, it is rare to see somebody's health change in a revolutionary way because they lost weight. And I have a ton of data to support that. What I do see is when there's a commitment to health promoting behaviors, just like the example Amanda just shared, there is a change in those markers that are important for us in regards to prevention of disease, longevity, how you're feeling, energy metabolism, hormonal health, GI health. That's what I want to look at and focus on. And there's just, it is a sad truth that we have been far too interested in the size of somebody's body in regards to our assessment of their health for a very, very, very long time. And to this day, major health issues are missed in both individuals in smaller sized bodies and individuals in larger sized bodies, because we aren't assessing properly for individuals in smaller bodies, and we are ignoring them for individuals in larger bodies. Literally daily, I see that show up in practice. Daily, I see it show up. So my hope is if we could just flip all of this around a bit. I mean, there's a major shakeup, right, that needs to happen, but I think we're getting there. I think we're making some strides for sure. But if we could flip this around, we would really start looking at the health promoting behaviors that matter. And that does take into account then looking at the social determinants of health, right? When you're saying, well, can you eat more vegetables? That might come along with, Do you have access to vegetables? What does that look like? How can I support you in that way? As opposed to saying, really what needs to happen is you need to lose weight to get into a healthier BMI. And then that person goes on their way and says, well, I guess I just have to lose weight. And A, I have no idea how to do that. B, I don't have access to healthier food. C, I don't even know what healthier food looks like. Complex.
I think you said something, and I sort of had this epiphany. Maybe that's a little melodramatic, but I had this thought that I think that for a long time we have been correlating the idea that if people do health promoting behavior that results in thinness, then they're more likely to do the health promoting behavior that's associated with health. And so I think part of it too is in the effort from a public health perspective, at least, to simplify the messaging and help people get on board. We've often, maybe even well-intentioned, told people that if you end up getting thin, that same thing will end up creating health. And I think what is really kind of standing out to me is that not only has that been a harmful message, that's been a message that has, I think, made us go in the opposite direction in terms of the rise of chronic disease. That's why we named this webinar, Weight Loss is Not a Health Goal, because we have to start making the health goal be the outcomes, like your cardiovascular risk, your your lipid markers, the quality of your lipid markers. Another controversial topic that maybe we'll talk about another day. But we have to start talking about, all of those other qualitative factors that make you move towards a healthier dietary pattern, lifestyle pattern, right? Again, I have never seen all the studies on Mediterranean diet, the blue zones, like any of the longevity studies. They might talk about weight being part of, hey, they tend to have on average lower body sizes, weights, BMIs than the average of that population. But it never jumps to that's why they're healthy. We're looking at the dietary patterns. We're looking at the lifestyle patterns. We're looking at what they do day to day. What are the habits that help them be healthier, live longer, more vital lives? So I think we're starting to see a dismantling, but the message has not fully saturated to us, especially since we've been raised and grown into a society that has pervasively sent us messaging that it's the opposite way, that it's important what size you're in, that it's important that you look a certain way, that you fit into a certain standard, that you fit into an idealized image of what beauty and health and fitness is. So for me, that what you just said, Abra, just really highlighted that. And I want to kind of turn it around and say, Amanda, you said that I was the first professor that you had in all your years of training that brought this up. And every time I post about this or talk about this or bring it up, I inevitably get pushback from colleagues I respect greatly, right? And so there is sort of this bias, because we have just been drilled this both from a societal perspective and an educational perspective. We have been taught this, and so it's hard to dismantle that. And two, I think that without knowing how to communicate that in a way, I think a lot of people are afraid it's going to unravel and that people are going to take the messaging to mean it doesn't matter what you eat. And I would love to hear, I'm going to switch it around. I've been starting with Amanda. I'm going to start with Abra now. I'm going to kind of pin that to you, Abra. Have you come across this? And I'm curious your thoughts about that.
I got distracted because I was reading a comment. Yeah.
I was talking about the pushback. I was talking about the pushback from our colleagues and clinicians that say it's sort of like, it's almost they're afraid that we're going to unravel if we change the messaging, right? Even if they get it, they're on board. They go, well, if I tell them it's okay, is that going to mean they're going to start engaging in unhealthy behavior? Or they're afraid that, I've seen it so much that I've seen this correlation so much in these areas or in this population I work with.
Yes,
we see this a lot. I'm curious your thoughts and your experience in that conversation.
This is very complex and nuanced, and like all topics, I could speak on just this one piece for several hours, because I think one thing that's happening that we have to just put out there is that there is absolutely a division in our field right now, where there has been a movement towards more recognition of living in of health at every size, let's say, and intuitive eating. And there is a sort of dogmatic philosophy attached to, bear with me for a minute, attached to intuitive eating that has separated out then individuals that are also working in the nutrition and functional medicine space and saying, well, hold on a minute, there are actually foods that are perhaps more health supportive, and what does that look like? And I have seen over the last few years a lot of tension starting to grow, right? And these sections really separating apart. And then people are getting even harder dogmatically around, we cannot accept that health at every size is okay. We cannot accept that you can be healthy in a larger size body, because if we say that, then we're aligning with this philosophy of intuitive eating that's saying all foods fit and you can just eat Doritos all day long and be healthy and everything is okay. And there's actually, just like everything in this world, there's so much gray and there's so much nuance here, even though we want to all stand in this black and white space. I personally, I have been kicked out of groups for standing up for health at every size, kicked out of functional medicine groups. I have been kicked out of alumni groups from universities where I'm like, hold on, what you're saying here is not okay. And you're all going to be doing massive disservice in practice if you're coming into practice with so much fat bias. And their response was, you're no longer accepted here. So I tell that as like a little anecdote of actually how tense this topic is. It is very tense in our world. It's very, very tense. So there's a lot to unpack there. I don't know if we'll be able to bring those worlds together. I will say this as one little additional anecdote, is that I do believe it is very hard to stand in the space of intuitive eating for all, with the understanding that we're also living in a world where industrialized food has really changed the way we interact with food. And if you know me in real life, you know that I'm very much attached to a European lifestyle, and my dream is to live part-time in Europe. I just got back from Italy. Every time I'm there, I am so touched by how people interact with food and how natural it is. And this time in particular, I was really thinking about, it's deeply ingrained. It is a learned behavior to love and appreciate and respect food, and thus have a more natural relationship with food compared to the country that we live in, where we just don't love and respect food in that way, right? We don't have to get into all that, but I think everyone probably knows what I'm referring to. So there's a lot of complexity and a lot of layers in this, in regards to understanding the sort of stigma of talking about, like, well, if we're not going to work with weight loss, then what are we doing, right? Isn't that, I mean, trust me, most people think working with a nutritionist is to lose weight. I think there's still a pretty big belief system, right, attached to that's what
I confirm that. I confirm that in my everyday email inbox.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
I'll step off my
that really, I think, hit a nerve for some people, because there's some comments in there, and feel free to read through them. And yes, agreed. There's somebody that said that they really appreciate your moderate approach and just like digging your heels in where, like, no, this isn't good enough. And the way my jaw dropped, that your speech to inclusivity was what excluded you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it starts to show kind of like where we're at, that this is a challenging conversation. And Amanda, yeah. I'd love you to speak to the same thought.
Yeah, I wrote down a few things, and I just want to say that, everybody has their own body autonomy, and health is not a moral obligation. And I don't feel, I think we have been taught that we always need to be striving for better, healthy, or what, but for so many of my clients, that actually means eating processed foods, eating Doritos, eating Twinkies, not moving their body so that they could heal their relationship with food. And so a lot of my work is helping people. And that has been my personal work of like, I've got Doritos. I eat all foods. I eat it all. And so I do sometimes think that the process, and that's coming up a lot, the processed food is like, the relationship with food for me, especially for people and in all size bodies, is eating everything. So yeah, I guess I just wanted to say that, but I do agree, Abra, about, you know, there is these two sides between health at every size, which for people who don't know what that is, health at every size is a social justice movement. And it's not saying that you're healthy at every size, but what it really is saying is that health promoting behaviors are available at any size body, and that people in all size bodies have the right to exist. And so I will link to the Association for Size Diversity and Health in the chat. So yeah, I guess I just want to say in terms of like, you know, health is not a moral obligation. I think sometimes we need to take a little bit of step back and again, and think of like, what does health mean to you? And so like in my case, continuing to follow, you know, eating whole foods only and doing those sorts of things was really detrimental. And I needed to stop that. And I needed to eat a lot of refined carbohydrates and as much as possible in all different ways. And now I'm kind of in this place after doing the work where I kind of have it all, but it's so confusing. And I think what happens is clients come to us and they're like, I read a comment here and I kind of want to include it of, you know, I don't feel comfortable in my body anymore. Or I feel like if I don't try and lose weight, then I'm giving up.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a lot. And that's why this conversation is so complicated, because we really need to spend time learning from our clients. Well, where did you get that messaging? What else is happening? When did you feel good in your body? What else was going on in that time? How do we start to help you feel more comfortable or gain acceptance in your here and now body, right? Not like it, not love it, but what are some things that we can do to kind of help you in that moment? And a lot of it does mean getting mad at diet culture, at the forces, the patriarchy, capitalism, you know, maybe your mom, right? Everybody talks about how their mom really messed them up, but that's okay. But like all these forces that kind of caused you to feel this way about your body. And that's why it's not so simple as someone coming to you and being like, yeah, well, here's a diet plan and just like lose the weight. That's why this is, we have to treat everybody as an individual. Yeah.
I want to make two comments from the comment section, and I sort of want to like move into some of those questions. And number one, somebody said I was one of those people that thought nutritionists were for losing weight, and you're not the only one. We get this all the time, and the assumption is I'm not overweight or I know what to do to lose weight, then I don't need a nutritionist. And I think that is exactly, that makes sense in a society that doesn't value nutrition, personalized nutrition, and nutrition in the service of improving our health outcomes. I'm optimistic, and maybe I'm stupid. I don't know. I'm optimistic though. I think things are going in the right direction, because I think with the growth of things like functional medicine, lifestyle medicine, more and more people are learning about the value of quality of nutrition. I think there's been sort of a rise in that wave. I think that will change, but I'm so glad you came today, because if no other message resonates, I hope you understand that our job, most of us, are thinking about how we can use nutrients and lifestyle to really build a personalized path for your personal health goals. And I see you nodding. So I think we're all on the same page with that. The other comment I want to bring up is from Cassandra, sort of speaking to kind of a lot of what we were touching on in terms of how we got here. I remember being in a public health conference in the early 2000s when presenters would bring up the scary maps, always in red, of obesity sweeping the country. These were the same conferences during which social determinants of health were really beginning to gain ground as the framing. So there's a lot of history to your point in this, and I think we're still struggling to figure out how's that data relevant? Again, it's the correlation piece that I think is more important, and going more upstream. Renata, hi Renata, by the way, said that, you know, this is part of the idea that like the quality of your food, that canned food is okay, that we have to acknowledge access, and that not everybody has fresh food options, whether it's geographic, financial reasons, they're in a food desert or food apartheid situation. There are going to be reasons why people cannot access the healthiest of food. So I think we can't keep hounding and beating down this idea of personal responsibility about body size and then equate that to health, and then not expect people to be like, I'm bad, I did this to myself, when they get told they have to lose weight and that's why they're unhealthy. I think I love seeing sort of all this tie in. Do you guys mind if we take a question? I want to see if there was a great question here. Christina S. Or do you want to, I'll read the question if you don't feel comfortable jumping in, but I'd love for you to sort of unmute and say what you said. I'll give you a second to respond. You were talking about the idea that weight loss leads to better health aside from, you know, how you look, but this is a simplified way for us to translate the messaging. Lose weight and your markers should get better, and people can't lose weight, so they are off the hook. So if people cannot lose weight, then that's the problem. That's why they can't attain better health. And most people do not talk honestly about their personal lives, but talking about their weight loss is socially acceptable. That's a really great point, because I feel like it's easy for us to say, I need to lose weight. It's harder to say, I'm having a hard time losing weight because I'm sad, because I feel lonely, because it's hard for me to find time to cook for myself, because I feel guilty that I'm not doing enough for my family, right? And I think that's a really good point. One more question here. This is a really good one. And this is another Christina. This is Christina V. A lot of Christinas today. What would your approach be for a client who comes to you for weight loss because he or she wants to go back to the weight he or she felt best at? Perimenopause client who gained 10 pounds in the last year, and she said, I quote, not feeling comfortable in my skin anymore. And this is a direct quote. And Christina V, if you want to unmute and speak to that, please feel free to.
Yeah, I mean, basically what I wrote, this discussion is definitely super helpful, and I'm definitely going to gain a lot from this in terms of, you know, what I can tell her when I meet her again. But she, yeah, I mean, she mentioned that she didn't notice all this weight coming on until she went to her annual physical exam. And she noticed that she was 10 pounds heavier compared to the previous year. And she said she was terrified of that, because, like I said, she didn't notice his weight coming on gradually. It was when she went to the doctor 1 year later that she saw that she was 10 pounds heavier, and she's like, I'm eating healthy, I don't know what to do. And she just kept mentioning that this new weight was terrifying for her. So I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Who wants to jump in first?
Yeah, I just want to, like, and as someone who is in perimenopause and has a similar experience, like, it is terrifying, and I can imagine that she's terrified. And what I would talk to her, it's a beautiful conversation that you can have, is like, what's the fear there? When we follow it, okay, well, then I'm gonna be healthy, and then what? And then what? And then what? And like, when we follow this kind of breadcrumb trail, like, what is the real fear here? The other thing you could say, you know, I felt better, you know, when I, you know, was a smaller body. Like, what are some sort of things that you did? And can we help bring those into the now? So maybe I was able to run more, I was walking, or I was doing sorts of things. So how do we start to develop a different relationship with her here and now body? And maybe some education around how we just tend to gain weight during this time, and that is very normal and natural. And the last thing I want to just mention is body grief. And this is something that I talk about all the time with my clients, is really making space for her to grieve a body that feels challenging. And when we say, oh, you're fine, I'm not saying that you do this, but we're like, oh, you're going to be fine. Or we're like, oh, let's fix it, let's help you lose weight. We're really just, it's almost like pushing, like you know, you have a beach ball and you push it under the water and you like wrestle it down, but no matter what, it's going to pop up. Like, when we kind of give space to talk about the grief that they have in their body, how it feels to be a midlife woman, just in society in general, how does it feel that you can't do some of the things that you did? we're able to kind of give that some air, and then we're able to move through it. And then we can help our clients moving towards kind of more acceptance. But I would say if you feel comfortable making space for talking about, yeah, this effing sucks. It does. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. I just want to take a minute to honor how beautiful that conversation can be with clients, how truthful it can be. Sometimes even just hearing, just normalizing that it does feel bad to when your body changes size, that we can normalize that process too. That can feel uncomfortable. I shouldn't say bad. It can feel uncomfortable when your body changes size. It also can be a very normal thing. It can be a very, very normal thing for many, many, many different reasons our bodies change size. But we are sort of led to believe that we should, my goodness, I'm thinking back to an old family friend that was in Weight Watchers, I kid you not, for like 45 years. And she went every month to those Weight Watcher meetings to weigh herself to stay within a 2-pound range for her entire life. And I think about that all the time. Like, could you imagine staying within the same 2 pounds? Right? That is just, that's not the way bodies work. It's not the way bodies work, but we're led to believe that that is the way that bodies work. So being able to have that conversation is such a beautiful thing.
I really appreciate that. I'm going to say something that sounds contradictory to what you're saying, and I'm going to use it to sort of pivot to another question. But I do think that there are people whose weight does stay within a certain range. And I would actually even argue that for those people whose weight is pretty consistent within very rarely a 2-pound range, but like a 5-pound range, or fair. Yeah. But the idea, again, this goes back to the idea of using the weight fluctuations more as a sign that something else is going on. And hey, this is shifted, morally neutral observation that my body has changed in either consistency or size or weight. And then we can use that information to then see if there's something, hey, what other symptoms, what else is going on in your life? Well, we could dig a little bit deeper and look at what may have caused that. Again, just like we might look at blood pressure, or we might look at your blood work, right? And use that as sort of an indicator that something has changed metabolically. That might be helpful, right? But I think to your point, the sort of like honing in on such a narrow window, I don't know that that's always possible. I don't. And that kind of brings me to a great question. I think we're laying this great foundation in terms of the philosophical conversation of what it is to shift the conversation about weight. Can we get granular about what it actually means to talk about health promoting behavior, and what are the objectives? If it's no longer weight, once we take that off the scale, pun intended, what do we then focus on instead? And what does that mean in terms of how we have these conversations? I'll let you guys pick who wants to go for Abra. You look like you got something.
I'll just jump in quickly, because one of the studies that I reference very frequently that specifically is looking at health promoting behaviors and all-cause mortality, the behaviors that they were, if memory serves right, the behaviors they were measuring whether or not somebody smoked, so cessation of smoking, moving your body. I believe it was 150 minutes per week for women, if I'm correct. May have been a little bit more for men. Vegetable intake was something that was being measured in that one particular study. So it was 4 or more servings of vegetables per day. Smoking, that was it. Those are the 3 that they were looking at. Those 3 health promoting behaviors. So eating vegetables, that's it. Smoking or not smoking, and moving your body. So in, health promoting behaviors, I think will sort of shift from person to person, that it can be very highly individualized. It will shift from practitioner to practitioner, some things that you're working on, depending on the conditions that you're working with. But sometimes I will go back down to those very simple basics. I think like, hey, can we eat a vegetable? Can be a positive health promoting behavior. Can we get in vegetables? What does that look like? I'm obviously, like I said, I'm very attached to the sort of culinary side of nutrition. So looking at that piece, movement is a really important one. And then I'm always working on sleep and stress, because, I'm in New York. So
The stress piece is huge. And I think we don't even like think about that. And I remember reading a study a long time ago, and they're like, then one of the number one determinants of health is your connections and relationships with people. And we are still kind of getting out from under the collective trauma of COVID, where we were massively disconnected. And so focusing on, behaviors such as, gentle nutrition, movement, whatever that looks like, stress, sleep, of course, and stress. Like we have been taught and trained to go to weight because that's what we know how to do. We know how to diet, or we think we do, right? We know how to do those things, but really to kind of sit back and look at our stress, or to get support around that, those things take longer. They're a little bit more difficult. But they have more impact into your health, these behaviors, rather than just saying, go lose weight. So I love that you brought that up, Abra, because it's so important.
Yeah.
I think these are all really good points. I think if we want to learn more sort of about what these health promoting behaviors, we're all waiting for more data. Frankly, we're starting to understand, and we're starting to unravel what it means. This is why I'm so fascinated by these longevity studies. This is why I'm so fascinated when I talk about anti-aging. I'm not talking about it because I want to look like I'm 25 for the rest of my life until I die at 150, right? It's because I want to understand what it takes to be able to do all the things I love as I get older, right? I want to know what these health promoting behaviors are, so I could share them with other people who want to play with their great grandkids. You know what I'm saying? So it's about that quality of life piece. And so what we know so far is what we understand about the Mediterranean diet, what we understand the blue zones, what we understand about the studies on the people in the regions that live over the age of 80, that again, it rarely talks about body weight other than a side effect of the benefits of all the other factors. It's a nutrient dense diet that's mostly plant dense, nutrient dense whole foods. It is a diet that emphasizes connection. It emphasizes the quality of life. It emphasizes regular activity, and not necessarily like high intensity activity, but just like regular, it's like a part of what you're doing every day, where it's woven into your day-to-day routine, where it's walking to school versus driving to school, where it is gardening every day and getting out into your garden, Abra, where it is having everything that is convenient for healthy behavior versus where you have to go out of your way to attain healthy things. That's why what we were saying before about being in a food desert, you have to go out of your way to eat healthy. You have multiple barriers you have to go through in order to get fresh food. You're already at a foundational disadvantage of being able to accomplish that. So to answer the question and sort of like come back and wrap it up so that we can wrap up on time, I think when we say about what these health markers are, yes, it's a little bit your blood work. We talk about, that there are markers within your blood work that could give us clues as to how your body is performing, the level of inflammation that you might have, the quality of your cholesterol, your blood sugar sensitivity, your insulin sensitivity, and your blood sugar control. How healthy is your liver? How healthy is your digestion? Are you pooping every day? Are you pooping every day? Do you know how many people don't poop every day? Oh my gosh. Okay, that's a whole other webinar. But these are all the kind of the markers that I look for, the ones that come off the top of my head, in terms of what can tell me that you have a healthy dietary pattern, or you have a healthy lifestyle. If you're losing your hair and you're telling me you're stressed out, I'm not worried that you're losing your hair because it looks a certain way. I'm worried about it because it's a symptom of what it is that is stressing you out, right? And how that's impacting your body. Final thoughts. Amanda, I'll start with you and then go to Abra and we'll sort of wrap up.
Final thoughts. I guess I want to say, if you're someone who does pursue weight loss, or you do work in the weight loss field, no judgment from us. And again, body autonomy is the main thing. If you're a provider meeting clients where they're at, don't be afraid to talk about body image and how they're feeling. But again, everybody has their own story and history, and whatever anybody decides to do with their body, that's their lived experience, and that's okay.
I will absolutely second that. And I think that's such an important thing to close with, because yes, we are all individuals, and our journeys are our own journeys. And that's what I am here to support. Again, the title is weight loss is not a health goal, but we're not saying that if weight loss is a goal of some kind for you, that's not my place to judge that or to say that's not appropriate. But I think there are other markers that we can use to help better identify health status. So.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you so much, Abra, Amanda, for just sharing your wisdom and your heart with us today. It was tremendous. I knew this conversation was going to get really
We should do part
juicy.
two. I think
we should do a part two. If you
two.
guys want a part
Okay.
two, DM us, email us, let me know. We will do a part two. Your questions and the conversation in the chat has been amazing. So thank you to all of you for joining. I appreciate you all. We will make this recording available. We'll if you want to share it, I want to make sure that it gets out to as many ears that need to hear it as much as possible. And again, huge appreciation and gratitude for everybody for your time, and everybody's just brilliant insights. And thank you so much for everything that you do.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much.
Have a great day.